Now we're going to add a way for our player to use the key. We're going to specifically add a less than optimal way, in my opinion, and then figure out how we can refactor that and talk about why it's less than optimal. We're going to start by adding the code onto our key script. So let's stop playing. We're going to open up the key script. And when we pick up the key, instead of just setting the position, let's also bind up to the player input so that we can remember or get notified whenever the player presses the fire button. So I said remember, but I really mean get notified or get told about. So we're going to say var player input equals player.getComponent player input. Then we'll say player input dot actions, just like before. And we're going to get the fire action by name. Let's see if I can get rid of that pop-up there. And then we'll register for the performed event. I'll say plus equals, and I'm going to name this method use. Let's call it use key. Make it a little bit more explicit. I'm going to generate a method for that, and we'll get a use key method that passes in that callback context for our input action. I don't care about that context though. All I want to do is find all of the locks that are within a specific range that I can customize or adjust, and then tell them to toggle. Now, to get all of the locks in a range, I can use the physics2d overlap circle method, which is what I'll do. First, I'll type in var hits equals, so that I have something that I can assign all of the hits to. And it's going to be physics2d, P-H-Y-S-I-C-S, 2D, there we go, dot overlap circle, but I want to make sure that I get the circle that gets all of them. So it's overlap circle all. There's also overlap circle non-alloc, which is slightly better. We'll talk about that later though. Let's for now just use overlap circle all because we're only going to be activating this or firing this off when we use the key anyway. So it's not going to be a big allocation issue. Now we need to give it two parameters, the starting point or the initial position, which is just going to be our transform dot position, and then a radius, which is going to be like our use range. So I'm going to name this underscore use range, and then hit Alt Enter and generate a field for it. I'll hit F12, and then let's go give this a default of like 1 meter and make it a serialized field. So there we go. We've got a use range of 1. I'm going to add the semicolon to the end of the line, and now we've got back a list, or really it's a collection or an array of these hit objects. Now my mouse over is not giving me the proper tooltip there, so I'll just continue on. So we've got our overlap circle hits, and what I want to do is loop through each of these hits. So say for each var hit in hits, we want to check against this object and see if it has a key lock or a toggle lock on it. So I'll say var toggle lock equals hit dot get component, and we'll try to get a toggle lock component if the toggle lock exists. So if it's there, then we'll let's add some braces. Say toggle lock dot toggle. And then let's just break or return out of this loop so that if we have multiple toggle locks in range, we only hit one of them. There should never be a scenario where we hit multiple, but we don't want to loop over all of the other colliders in there if we've already found a lock. I'm going to remove this private keyword now, save and do a build, and let's go try out our key. We should be able to run over and use our key on that lock and watch it turn on and off. All right, we'll play. And then run over and grab our key. Come over to the lock, click, and look at that, it turns on, click, it turns off, click, it turns on, click, it turns off. If I don't have the key, well then that's not gonna happen. So let's just go double check that and make sure that I can run over there with no key on and click, because every now and then you'll write code and not realize that you shortcutted something. So let's see, yep, doesn't work without a key, exactly as expected. And if I pick up a key and run back over, it works fine. All right, so now we've got our key kind of working, but there's definitely an issue here. One of the biggest issues is that our key, if it disappears, is going to start causing us to get some errors. It's going to start causing us to throw exceptions. Let's take a look at that. Go find our body upper, arm right, arm lower, hand, and that item point. So let's say I just deleted my key. and now I press fire. Now I'm going to start getting null reference exceptions because the performed event is trying to fire off into something that no longer exists. It's trying to make a callback into something there. We also have, this is also getting called, I believe, by our input system as well. So the input system bindings are still there, even though our key has disappeared. Also, if we have that key there and then we have our blaster and we pick up some other items, if our key is listening for the inputs and registering for that, then our objects are, in my opinion, doing way too much. They're thinking too much. They're having a little bit too much control. These items instead should probably be controlled by the player or by some player inventory, and have that script tell them when to be used and when not to be used. Then we can hook up our bindings once, have it so that our player input just binds to whatever system it is that uses the items, and then have that system tell the items, whichever item is currently equipped, to be used. So that's where we're going to take this next. But for now, we're going to stop playing. We're going to go into Plastic, and we're going to say that we added let's save our scene too. Added a bad key use system. So added basic key use setup, not optimal. So we remember it's not the optimal setup that we want, but it's our first version of it, which is, again, the way that I always like to write stuff. Make sure that we've got our code, we've got it working, we've kind of got it figured out, and then we figure out the actual system that it's going to fit into. Try to let these systems kind of develop and build around what it is that we're creating instead of trying to guess and predetermine what they need to look like. So let's check that in.